valuable things, until at last he has only one more valuable thing left to give, his soul. Please, before you begin the contest, entrust your soul to some trustworthy person, so that if you lose everything you own, at least you will not have to give your soul to that horrible Ginny. The alchemist was not at all afraid. How many riddles could he possibly get wrong? But he consented to this precaution just to get the old hermit to leave him alone. Since the old hermit was the most readily available, trustworthy person, the alchemist muttered some incantations and entrusted his soul to the old hermit himself. "Very well," said the alchemist. "Now are you content?" "I did warn you," said the old hermit, and laughed a long and dark laugh. And that, it is concluded, is why a Ginny absolutely cannot in any circumstances be trusted. Jessera looked at them blankly. "What kind of story is that?" she asked. "I do not understand. What happened to the alchemist and the monkey and the riddles?" "The alchemist lost his soul to the Ginny," said Idris. "How?" "The Ginny was the old hermit all along, of course," said Idris. "That was his trick. Surely you must have realized." "Of course not," said Jessera. "How could one realize that from the story you told?" "It would appear that neither you nor the alchemist did," Idris said. "He was tricked into giving up his soul without ever trying to answer a single riddle." "But what about the talking monkey?" "Ah," said Idris, "the old hermit, the Ginny, that is, really, was lying all along about the talking monkey being the Ginny, of course. It was just an ordinary talking monkey." Jessera broke into laughter at last, and Idris smiled. "And that is why you should never, under any circumstances, trust a Ginny," he concluded.
Riley Ford. Riley Scripps Ford grew up in Harbor Springs, Michigan. Still has a foot of snow on the ground. He's a staff columnist for the Yale Daily News. He enjoys sports, typewriters, and pretentious double-barrel names. I'm starting more or less from the beginning, so you don't need any context. But don't worry, this is fiction. When I was 13 years old, I watched my father shoot my uncle in the head. There was little gore and no uncouth seizing. My uncle bled out from a coin-sized hole above his right ear while wearing a waistcoat identical to the one worn by my father, who stood opposite him in the most perfect field I've ever seen. Although perpetually unmown, the wheat there moved with somnambulant poise and housed a colony of crickets. There were fewer of them after that day. I often wonder whether their species harbored some allergy to blood or to death, or were simply put off by the unpleasantness of the event, as I should have been. Wherever they fled, I doubt they found a field more full of sun than ours. On this particular day, I did not sit in the field, but instead in a canvas chair on the back patio of our house, raised 20 feet on a quartzite mound that afforded us the illusion of safety. My older brother Richard sat on the arm of my chair with his hand on my shoulder. His blonde hair was brightest in summer when it spiked and split with the wheat. The lines around his eyes made him look older than he was, which was still younger than he acted, and were evidence of how much time he spent outside squinting at the sun. So were the freckles that sprouted on his nose each June, and the mahogany tone of his forearms. If not for Richard's clothes, usually a Henley shirt with red braces, he could have been mistaken for a bright-eyed feral child. I tried to copy him in this regard, but did not have the shoulders to sustain my own suspenders. On Richard, they seemed to be the only safeguards keeping his soul contained in physical form. But on the day of the duel, he was quiet, stern without being stoic, and, I'm quite sure, terrified. He did not show it. My father and uncle stood several feet apart in the middle of the golden field, loading their revolvers and imagining what death might feel like. The referee, a man named Owen, who doubled as our groundskeeper, sat on a stool between them. This was 1908, long enough ago for Owen to have done this before, but late enough to make him nervous. There was a time when aristocratic circumstances of most duels shrouded the outcome in legal immunity, even if the practice was technically outlawed in the United States. It was not murder by these standards if both participants were consenting gentlemen. That time was almost past. Owen knew it, and Father knew it as well, but one cannot simply slay one's kin in cold blood, and the situation demanded a certain formality that strangling my uncle in his bedchamber would have lacked. "Colt, I want you to listen to me," Richard said from his armchair perch. You don't have to watch, you know. You can close your eyes. You probably should. Father won't miss, will he? I asked. Of course not. But watching someone die can be sort of scary. Have you ever seen someone die, Richard? I did not mean this as an accusation. I often probed every thread of Richard's wise pronouncements, not because I doubted him, but because I was searching for further truths. This time, Richard did not see it that way. Of course not, Cole. What do you think? Well, do you think Uncle Cam is going to die? Richard's eyes counted each bullet as my father slipped them into the revolver with his thick, caterpillar-like fingers. Yes, Cole, I do. Richard would later say our uncle should have paid as much attention to his paces as his posture. He seemed to march rather than walk from his starting position, knees popping up through the sea of wheat as he went. Rich, why is Uncle Cam walking like that? I asked. He's scared. Folks stand up straighter when they're scared. Father's not standing up very straight. Hush. Father slouched to his side of the field, one hand on his revolver and the other gripping his belt. His shoulders slowly swallowed his neck as he went, and he buried his bearded chin in his throat. Richard, I don't think Father is paying attention. Colton, hush. Now, this is the complicated part of watching duels. From any vantage point close enough to observe the grisly details, which we greatly desire, it is impossible to perceive both participants at the same time. So we were forced to swivel our necks from one side to the other like spectators at a tennis match. I missed the detonation of hair and bone that issued from the back of my uncle's head when Father shot him. Later discussion of the duel suggested I was the only one. Instead, I watched my father, who turned and fired without expression. On the other side of the field, my uncle's body relaxed and began a helpless little pirouette. As he fell, a scud of rage passed from one half of my father's face to the other, and he shot Cam a second time. It was all he would permit himself, that little ripple which distorted one eyebrow, one cheek, and one nostril, even as the other side of his face had already resettled, released for no more than a second, for fear it might paralyze him forever. This I saw. The others witnessed only the aftermath. A composed man who walked from the field to his study without comment, and who rarely spoke again in the 20 years he had left to live. Thank you.
Alice Hodgkins. Was taken by surprise. Yes, she's here. She'll be attending an Episcopal seminary after graduation. She'll miss the tulips growing in Jonathan Edwards running around East Rock for the endless construction.
The second sitting room. Saturday, picking little pebbles out of pots in the conservatory. Through the glass panels, snow on top of the yard bench. Beyond it, the lower field hill is twisted, becoming a different kind of hill up the slope, angular and pointed. A little milk, and then the tea. You watch me pour another cup. Is an amaryllis ever beautiful? You say, putting your book down on your stomach. Weeks of snow press up against the window. In a corner of the fogging chamber, a red blossom in the white sunlight. The second poem is called Scud Running, which is a term that pilots use to describe the act of outrunning a thunderstorm by flying among the small, wispy clouds that precede it. Scuds. Scud Running. The leap across was onto slanted rock, the facing side covered in a dark green moss, growing up out of the brook bed. From the top of the water, loose scuds rose up, that is, down, laterally, and rotated away. Under the surface, a level stretch broke into several channels. The whole land was over-wet, with its rotten trees crumbling at the touch. I dipped my foot in. The water was clean and cold. Behind, many nets were stretched out across the streams, unattended. Beside them, horizontal trees everywhere, to bound over or mistake for ground, covered with glistening slug skins. The water licked white around an oblong stone, turning yellow in the pitch and heading downstream. the girth